Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Gambling Files podcast. On this week's podcast, it's going to be a shorter intro today because we're juggling family stuff. This week's podcast, we have the wonderful Katherine Sayre, returning guest, reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and she covers the gambling industry beat for the WSJ. Delighted to have her back. We talk about a bunch of things. So on this episode, we're talking to her about her recent article about a psychiatrist in the US, who developed a gambling addiction, and Katherine unpacks all of that and everything that happened with her and the operators and these kind of things. So it revolves into a nice discussion around responsible gaming, cultural difference between US and UK in terms of taking responsibilities. We were recording this ahead of the hearings about sports books. I think it was in Michigan, limiting customers. Concept of fairness, accepting a bet, right to refuse a customer. Super interesting. We then talk about sweepstakes, and obviously there's been a bit of press about that from the industry, and realistically, it's legal, legislated, and really, really interesting discussion to get our thoughts around that. And so we've got Katherine. She's fantastic. Delighted to have her back. And her work with the Wall Street Journal is utterly amazing. So thank you for Katherine. Other thank yous to our sponsors. So big thank you to Clarion Gaming, ICE 2025, Barcelona. It's coming sooner than you think. Book your hotel, get ready, time to go. So that's super exciting. And also Optimove, gambling industry's number one CRM software. Book the demo, click the link below, they'll help you make more money, better retention, better margins, send the right offer to the right customer. So basically all the dream stuff that they take that happen. So big thank you to them as well for making this happen. And like I said, it's a short intro, so let's get straight into chatting with Katherine. Enjoy.
We're joined by a returning guest, and it's always a nice feeling of validation when we're joined by a guest for the second or third or fourth time, because it helps Fintan and me feel like we're really a part of the human race rather than just watching from the outside. We're joined by Wall Street Journal journalist, it does feel like a bit of a mouthful, Katherine Sayre. Katherine, hello, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, the pleasure is definitely all ours. We appreciate you slumming it.
I'm very happy to be here.
She's so polite. Polite.
Let's reserve judgment on whether you're happy to be here or not until the end. And then we can do it like a customer survey, and maybe that will work.
I feel like an NPS score.
Yeah,
How likely would you recommend to a friend or family to come on the Gambling Files podcast as a guest?
Why can't I press 0?
Real people don't have these conversations.
I would press 5.
Okay. Oh no, 5's worse. 5's
out of 20.
5's like a no.
No.
All right. Yeah. It's only 8, 9, and 10 count. It's the way those scores work. It's tough.
It really is, isn't it?
Strict.
Fucking hell. And some places, if you don't get 10, like, people get into trouble.
Yeah.
But then you get people who are like, well, I couldn't give you 10 because 10 is perfect, and perfect isn't a thing. It doesn't exist.
Indeed.
I hate people.
So, John, why do we have Katherine back? What are we here to talk about?
That is a great question. And Katherine, we don't mean to talk about you, so you're not there. So Katherine wrote an article, it was months ago now. I've actually been chasing Katherine for months to come on.
Well, she's a very busy Wall Street journalist. Like,
see what I mean? It's a mouthful, isn't it? Wall Street Journal journalist.
Reporter. Wall Street Journal reporter.
Oh, she's good. This is why she gets paid the big bucks by the big papers.
That's why she's a real reporter, John.
I am taking notes, Fintan. I am taking notes. The Wall Street Journal reporter. The story that, if I'm remembering correctly, that Katherine broke was the story of the psychiatrist in the United States who wound up with a significant gambling addiction. If I remember right, the story was that the psychiatrist, it was a woman, and she was kind of doing the classic, have a few spins when I finish work to unwind, because psychiatry's, there are probably plenty of days that aren't that pleasant. And yeah, so she's kind of, unwinding. Stop me if I'm remembering this wrong, Catherine, but it was like, have a bath, have a glass of wine, unwind, play in a few slots or whatever, and it escalated in a big way. Now, Catherine, as the person that broke the story, do you think that? I mean, this is just my feeling on it, because there's so much commentary on this. This went mainstream worldwide, pretty much. The coverage of this story was extraordinary. Do you think that was partly because of the woman's profession?
I think for sure, Kavita Fisher coming out and telling her story, I think it was really brave for one. I mean, I go out and talk to a lot of people who have gambling addictions and who understandably, don't want to tell their story out of embarrassment or fear of shame. But yeah, I mean, just showing the vulnerability of someone who understands the human mind as well as she does, and still being caught up in this was a very powerful statement about, gambling addiction and how far it can reach. I mean, if I could go back and just kind of tell you a little bit about how I came to this story, like it was really more than a year in the making. I know there was a lot of conversation in the U.S. about marketing and advertising spend, and how much of this advertising content was being put in front of, American consumers. And that's an important conversation. But I was just super curious about this idea of the VIP services in the online gambling world. And, when I started talking with people about it, it was like, well, these VIP services, they've always existed in gambling, right? Like the high rollers getting flown into Vegas. So like, what's the big deal, But I just felt like it had to be different in this online space, just like everything is, right? The immediacy, the kind of data that can be used to track players. And so that was kind of the point of curiosity where I started. And it was a tough world to crack. It's an area of the business that the companies keep, pretty closely held. There's not any data reported on that in their, quarterly earnings. But yeah, I was just I went in curious about how VIP works, and through a long haul of reporting, eventually crossed paths with Dr. Fisher, the psychiatrist.
It's really interesting that's where that path led you. I mean, I know there's well, I mean, I've certainly taken over a year to write some things, but that's laziness rather than diligence on my part. But
he's not joking.
Well, sometimes these stories just take that long, and I think there's been a lot of great coverage of gambling addiction issues emerging in this, new space for the US. But I felt like a kind of missing piece in that was looking at companies' actions behind the scenes, again, through the VIP. And that was sort of locking down a story that kind of shined a light on that behind the scenes. It just takes a lot of time to find people who are willing to speak on the record,
Did you find anything out that really sort of raised your eyebrows, gave you a sort of permanently shocked expression? Was there anything that you learned that made you think, holy shit, what are we doing?
Well, for one, I reviewed some documents that showed back in 2020, 2019, PointsBet, which of course has been acquired by Fanatics and is a whole different company now. But PointsBet reported that internally that 0.5% of their sports betting customer base generated 70% of its revenue. So that just stuck out to me as like just proof of how important these high rollers are. And I'm sure there are people within that cohort who have the money and this is what they want to do, and they're adults and they want to, you know, spend tens of thousands of dollars a month on gambling, then, you know, that's their right. But I think what my story showed was there are some people getting caught up in these VIP worlds that are going far beyond their means.
And I think, it's a question that comes up a lot. And you see it at problem gambling conferences, and you see it when people who are outside of and not reporting on the industry are discussing it. There can be an assumption that the VIP and the problem gambler are almost exactly the same, or that the Venn diagram almost entirely overlaps between the two. When actually there are very distinct differences. The VIP and the problem gambler do share some commonalities in how they play, but they also share them with money launderers, and that doesn't mean that every problem gambler is a money launderer. But the flags are almost exactly the same, Finton. Multiple accounts, frequent deposits, etc., never withdrawing. It's like the AML flags and the problem gambling flags, for the purposes of software in the background, are very, very, very similar. Which is why really there's not really any excuse for companies to fail on their AML or their problem gambling stuff, because they should be right on top of that.
They have a lot of information. And in the case of Dr. Fisher, they knew who she was though, right? And because they built a personal relationship with her, and she was assigned a VIP host, and she would frequently ask for more bonuses. They can monitor her when her gambling slows down, throw some money at her. And that through that personal interaction, there are some, specific, red flags that she showed, sending emails to her host saying, "Oh, I'm doing terribly. Can you please help me out? This is a really painful week," using language that's showing this is not entertainment for her, And then at one point she asked the DraftKings host if DraftKings gave VIPs loans because she couldn't make her mortgage. And they intervened a bit with some like, "Hey, are you gambling within your means?" And she just said, "Yes." She said,
"Yes, that's why I'm asking for a loan, you fuckhead."
And she said, "Yes." And they threw a bonus at her and she kept going.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's not really any way around that one to make it look good, is there?
Oh, so what's fascinating for me is when you, like, if we compare this to the regulated markets, like let's take the UK as the simple example. So in the UK, there are rules around affordability and intervention, and these kind of like that email would have been a trigger which should have kicked off a whole host of stuff and things like this. And talking to some American friends over the last few years, they've all kind of said the same thing of like that the culture difference between the US and say Europe, UK, or a country in Europe like the Netherlands, for example, is that in America, the individual takes responsibility for the individual. So it's your responsibility to decide yourself what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And that sense of independence is very important and kind of ingrained in the American psyche, as an example, where in Europe, it'd be far more common for like the state to intervene and take care of things. And you get these EU rules about whatever. When you look at that from a problem gambling perspective and kind of an intervention perspective within problem gambling, is that where like two worlds collide, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I come from the perspective of, I go out in the world, and if I'm just talking to people who are totally outside the gambling industry, there's this attitude also of like, oh, gambling's dirty or bad, and why do we have gambling on the rise in the US? And it's like, okay, well, states have decided they're going to legalize and regulate gambling. So that's it. Like, elected officials, our representatives have decided we're going to do gambling. And so it's a very, to your point, I think it's just a very uneasy relationship here that it hasn't sorted itself out yet. This idea of like the independent person making their own decisions, but the companies themselves and some regulators have said, responsible gaming is a priority for us. Of course, the industry's point all along has been, we can do this ourselves. We can do this ourselves. And so, they've promised to do something about this. And so, it's time to see how they're actually going to handle this.
Yeah, because when you've got like a VIP host, it's you get what you incentivize. So if I'm a VIP host and my job is to make sure you're happy and spending, then that's what I'm going to do, because that's what my performance review is tied to, and that's what my bonus is tied to. So there can be, like, the company itself can have very good intentions and a lot of stuff in place, but then if a group of employees have effectively different incentives, you create this mismatch in corporate, what's in the annual report and what conversations with regulators versus what's happening day to day on the ground. And that's why when you look at every other market, these types of stories are pretty regular. VIP team have done X, Y, and Z, and here's all the screenshots of the WhatsApp messages, and like it typically doesn't take much digging to find something like this somewhere.
But if your VIP team is incentivized financially in any way, that's what that's what they're chasing. They're chasing their mortgage payment as well. And that just does not work. And you combine that with the old curse of the quarterly earnings, and you're fucked. In so many places, the whole, oh, we're committed to responsible gambling, it's just hollow. Here's the thing, right? We keep hearing from the AGA, and this actually ties in with something else I want to talk to you about, Catherine, which is the whole sweepstakes thing, which everybody's talking about right now. But like, the AGA's take on sweeps is, oh, it's unmonitored, anything could be happening out there, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, anything is happening right now in the regulated and monitored side. It's still, there's still a feeling of, right, okay, all right, just let me think how best to phrase this, right? So I was talking to an operator a while ago about how to approach players who might be having a bit of a problem. And what I said to them is, instead of pushing them towards a website with some ideas for them to not do on there, don't bet outside your means. Guide them towards places where they can interact with real people who have experience of this, where they can have actual conversations with human beings, whether that's on Reddit or whether that's with a person, whatever, but guide them towards people. And the VIP program is frontline human communication, doing the opposite of what the companies are saying that they're all about. We're all about looking after our players. If a player comes to you and says, I can't make my mortgage, will DraftKings lend me some money? And that's not alerting you to there being a problem, then there is potentially a cultural problem within that organization. Because no employee, VIP or otherwise, should be ignoring that massive red flag.
I mean, absolutely. Both of you are making, a great point. It is all about that internal culture, and whether problem gambling folks are being siloed. So, one could try to dismiss the story of Dr. Fisher as just a one-off, but I know in my reporting, it's just simply not the case.
Yeah, for sure, there's more. But on the flip side of it, the benefits of regulation is it can come to light, people can be held to account, and stuff can be put in place to. I don't think you'll ever eradicate it. That'd be the game, but I think to at least minimize or significantly reduce these types of incidents.
Do you think we're a long way from a player being able to say, like some of the stuff we've seen in Europe, some of those fucking hilarious lawsuits about, hang on, I shouldn't have lost any money to this illegal operator. I'm going to be needing that back. I shall sue. Do you think a player like this could actually go to an operator and say, I told you there was a problem. I told you I was having a problem. I want all my losses returned from that point when you should not have been accepting bets from me?
It's a great question. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if there are legal routes being considered.
I think that's coming.
Well, but the general longstanding legal precedent has kind of upheld that casinos, like brick and mortar casinos, can't be held responsible for someone choosing of their own will to, gamble away. And so, they've got VIP hosts, free hotel suites, all of it. So I don't know. And it's a really good question. Like, I just don't know if there's going to be some legal case that actually gains traction under the current regulations and the lack of a, federal oversight.
But you've also got to factor in things like, what was that case in Nevada? It was the guy saying that he'd been drugged by the casino. Now, but there is also a case for intoxication. Now, like, I don't drink, but I've been in casinos and I've been shit-faced in casinos. And, if you're playing, those wheels are well lubricated. The higher the stakes of the table you're playing on, the more frequently you see the waitress. I think there are banana skins being placed left and right here.
I don't think so. I think it's so well established. Like, Vegas has been doing this for a very long time. It's very well. It's like, I was watching a video the other day of Dana White joking about waking up one day thinking he only lost 50 grand the night before, and it turns out he'd lost 4 million the night before.
We've all been there.
And laughing about it. And stuff like, and then talking about like the special room that he has in all of these casinos with exactly how he likes everything and these
kinds of things. Who's Dana White?
He's the UFC president. So rich guy, famous higher up. So I think there's so many rich people in America who just need to get catered to, that it's just not going to go away. And the VIP team play a very, very important part of every operator. And I think they'll just manage it. I don't see the end of VIPs or lawsuits or anything like that. It can't. It's
not saying the end of VIPs. I'm just saying that if businesses are saying on the one hand, yes, we take responsible gambling seriously, and then don't, there's going to be repercussions from that, because especially when it's part of their licensing. Honestly, I really think somebody could chance this.
I mean, I understand the point. I think, that takes action by regulators. And, we've seen a few states being a little more curious about what some of the companies are doing. But
don't even get me started on regulators.
But that's all it takes, right? It just takes a regulator in one of the major states to say, hey, here's the new rule or rules. This happens, that you do this happens, do that, and send us your documentation to prove that you're doing it, and we'll be doing spot checks.
It's been relatively quiet. When I started covering this beat a few years ago, everyone talked about, there was the explosion of online sports betting and, to a smaller extent, iGaming. And even the companies are like, well, there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be a backlash, or there's going to be, it's not going to be like this forever. And then it seemed like 2023, really 2024, there was some coverage that in the industry's view was pretty bad. And it's just sort of like, I don't know, it just hasn't, there just hasn't been a lot of regulatory action in some big way. And that just exposes, or just shows just how complicated it is in the US with the state by state regulation.
It's not just in the US though. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Regulators everywhere have been showing how utterly toothless they are. I mean, look at the state of things in New South Wales. They've had to clamp down on the Star and all of that jazz. And I mean, that the failings there were going on for months and years. Where's the regulator in that? There aren't that many casinos in New South Wales that they were, really, really busy. They just don't appear to have actually been doing anything. Nevada Gaming Control Board with, what's the guy's name? Bugger. The laundering accusations and the...
Scott Sabella?
Thank you, yes.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? The Nevada Gaming Control Board's had that in its lap. And done... Well, let me put it this way. You get told that the regulating is severe. We get told that gambling is the third tightest regulated industry on the planet after pharmaceuticals and aeronauticals. And you get somebody who's apparently done that stuff, and it's not even a slap on the wrist. Do you know what I mean? That's not tight regulation. If somebody working on the cage had done that, they'd have been right in the shit. If somebody at the top end of that food chain does that, why is he not right in the shit? Why are there not, custodial terms? That doesn't make any sense to me. But, what do I know? Just a fat bloke on a podcast.
What do you guys think? Because, we're in this world of gambling, but it's not, I think top priority in the public's mind with everything going on. So I don't know if it's a matter of people just only have so many things they can pressure their representatives on. I mean, I don't know. It's similar to the way gambling addiction itself is definitely an addiction that people's response is not seeing it as a disease, not seeing it as a psychological or psychiatric issue. It's just personal responsibility. So I know I'm getting off of the money laundering case you're talking about, but I don't know, like, what's your perspective on the US? And
I think it'll come. And I think Churchill had a great quote of America will do everything before it does the right thing, or it'll try everything before they get to the right answer, kind of thing. And I think with this, it'll be a lot. I think it'll take time, and I think eventually, realistically, a problem gambling story in America would have to be so severe to make any dent in the current news cycle. Like, it would have to be just off the charts, like an entire school of kids doing high stakes blackjack or something like that, or like it would just have to be utterly insane to.
I think that was Ohio.
To even make a dent in it was my school. To even make a dent in the news cycle right now, and I think that'll be the way for, till after the elections. But I think Saturday Night Live have done a skit on sportsbook TV ads, and it was pretty funny, and it was
very good.
It is there. It is a bugbear. NFL season's just kicked off, so I'm assuming all the TV ads have really ramped up again, and we'll start that next cycle to the Super Bowl, and I think it'll happen eventually. I think it'll be done in its own time. All politics is local, and it'll be the sum of all things, and it'll be, okay, well, if we pass this legislation, what impact does this have on our land-based businesses, who are huge employers and huge contributors to the local economy and to the tax base and stuff like that? And once one state goes, typically they all tend to copy each other or take inspiration from each other. So there's usually a domino effect. So I think it'll be a slow rollout over a number of years. And eventually it'll probably be the benchmark that a lot of other countries use to measure their legislation against, is typically what I'd expect to see. So I'm an optimist, and I think it'll get there. I think it'll get there in the end, but it'll just be slow and messy and take time and very, very local to each state.
I think the thing about regulators is that partly it's because of the way that legislation works in the US with the actual structure of state level meetings and shit like that. They sit for 2 months or whatever, and then you're not going to get a chance to change anything for a year or whatever. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. That doesn't make sense in the rest of the world. But the thing is, with regulators, you never hear about regulators doing a good job, because if they're doing a good job, you've got no reason to hear about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, whenever you hear about a regulator, it's very rarely tied to a good news story or a well-regulated industry, because there's no reason to hear about that.
Tomorrow's going to be a big day in the US because the sports betting companies are appearing before the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, right, to talk about the limiting of winning bettors. And I can't think of another regulatory meeting where, almost like a congressional hearing, all the sports books are, showing up. I mean, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's kind of a first.
Well, the brilliant thing about this meeting just being called is that the Michigan board has credit in the bank for the meeting they called where everybody said they'd go and nobody turned up. And actually, that makes this the perfect time to do that, because now they're saying, look, if you're not going to turn up, you don't have a seat at the table, you don't have a voice in the conversation, you can go and get fired. I might be paraphrasing there.
So so from a, like, obviously limiting winning bettors is something that all gambling companies do.
Allegedly.
Oh, they do. It's
Fenton, we don't want to get sued off the air.
Well, they admit it. They say they have a right to do it.
Yeah, it happens. Every operator does it at some point. So what's the counter argument? Like, for example, the classic sign on a McDonald's front door is, no shoes, no shirt, no service. What's the counter argument that you have to accept a customer?
I mean, it's a very fair point. I think my read on it right now is that it's about fairness and how broad the companies are going in limiting. There's the sharps, people who use all the mathematical modeling that's beyond me to win, the professional bettors, and that's who the sportsbook operators like to focus on. Like, hey, we're an entertainment company. We don't have to support people making a living off of this. I try to dig a little further in my reporting, and it's not scientific. I just know that I've talked to many people who, they're just more casual bettors who hit a little winning streak and suddenly find they can't put, more than $1 down on a bet or something like that. And so, there has been a big movement. You have this new organization that was started in Vegas about, I can't remember the name of it. But all about betting fairness. Do you guys remember the group I'm talking about?
Oh, was it the Richard Schutz one?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've also forgotten the name now.
Anyway,
it's him and Spanky, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So they just had a big, conference in Vegas, the Bet Bash. So, or they're part of that. So it's a matter of fairness, I think, is what Massachusetts is looking at. Fairness is not, on this issue at least, is not written into the regulations as it stands now. And there's not a proposed regulation on the table right now. It's sort of exploratory for them at this point. And so, I mean, it's just a really interesting philosophical question almost about what, because, you're right, like card counting isn't illegal, but I can get kicked out of a Vegas casino for card counting.
But it's usually like when you look at, I think I think there's two parts to this. One is, all right, you've got the professional arbitrageurs finding the flaw in the model and picking off a book or whatever, or like, bonus abusing and doing these kind of things to kind of circumvent stuff, to really try and push an edge to beyond normal, give or take. But then, like you said, if it's a casual bettor who's just happened to have a good weekend and they're getting limited, then that's just a bad sports book. That's just a bad trading team who are just oversensitive. Now, some of it's the punter is lying and they've actually got 200 accounts and whatever as well. So there can be like a lot of false flags, whatever you want to call it. But then when you look at something like the, say, Prime Sports, you're like, we'll take everybody, let's go. And they're happy to outtrade everybody like a proper old school bookie, but they're doing it online and they're being very transparent about it. I think, to me, it feels like there's going to be this, some people are going to have to just up their game in terms of trading and what they're doing. And, but I suppose if you're a sports book and you've just had to spend however much for a New York license, and then you're spending however much on TV ads, and winning customers don't pay the bills. So there must definitely be a P&L tension of what's acceptable risk and things. But
do you think that the balance then has to come from the regulator side, in that, the barriers to market are so incredibly high, the marketing costs are so incredibly high. Could this fairness come from a leveling out of the tax situation and a realistic tax situation that actually slightly increases the margin for the operator so they can loosen the bets for the punter?
I would do it more as like easing the restrictions on licensing rather than tax. I think the tax is okay, New York's too high, but by and large, the tax is the tax, and it's pretty much in line with whatever. But then if you're in a state where it's limited to 2 or 3 sports books, what actually solves this is free market economics, where and again, part of it is because it's depending on population size and stuff, but if there was more free market competition, where it was easy for the prime guys to go get a license in that state and it wasn't going to cost a fortune, people who get limited to $1 bet on their favorite team this weekend are just going to switch accounts and go to somewhere where that'll take their business. And I think market economics, in a lot of ways, where the trading teams are actually competing against each other, is probably a big part of the answer. And potentially there's, you see it with, say, hotel pricing, or there was a big case recently with the hotel pricing and I think landlord pricing in one of the states, where if everybody's using the same software to set their prices, then there's a lot of stuff going on there. Is everybody using the same risk management software and coming to the same conclusions and creating this situation on the back end? I don't know. But I think free market economics should solve it, because these customers are trying to get a bet on and they've got money to spend, and somebody will, take the risk, calculated risk as a sportsbook operator.
Interesting point about whether they're using the same software, though, because there's a good chance that 60% of them at least will be using the same software, and there aren't that many software suppliers supplying that kind of software. So maybe that is somewhere where a regulator actually needs to start looking, because if they're employing the same mitigation techniques, then that's just going to It's not going to. It's going to fuck everybody across the board, isn't it? All the players, I mean, across the board. So that's a really interesting idea.
I do wonder if it's sort of also a matter of, is it just too late? You know, 6 years in, you've got two companies that have more than 2/3 of the revenue. Like, if you opened it up to more books, I don't know, like it's the landscape is sort of solidifying, if that makes sense.
So it's trying to launch another cola into the Pepsi Coke duopoly kind of thing. Is there room for, whatever?
There might be room for a Prime, but are there going to be room for, a lot of books, and a lot of books that actually can match the FanDuel and DraftKings brands among the broad consumer base? I don't know.
That is interesting, because it is a winner take all scenario in that case. That is interesting. Would it? I'm an optimist. I think it is. I think it can be done. I think you could definitely launch a brand and compete. Okay, you're not going to compete on complete size, but they are big. Like, it's the classic, big company stuck in their ways. They'll be slow to move. They'll be slow to do stuff. And I think you could be disruptive. And I think we're seeing it. If you look at probably their actual competition isn't the regulated licensed sports books. It's the Prize Picks, the bettors, in a way, the guys doing the playbook that the DFS brands did to, let's go build a database and then we'll follow licensing. And I think the sweeps space is really where the competition is going to come from, because they can compete, and bring in customers in California and Texas, and which are huge populations. And I think is that why? I suppose that's speculation, but there's obviously in the press now, there is some kind of negative sentiment towards the sweep brands and what's going on and what are these people doing. And it feels like they're actually disrupting the duopoly is kind of where it's going. And I think that's super interesting.
Definitely, particularly in the iGaming online casino space, right? Because you've got a regulated industry that would love to have iGaming across the country, like sports betting is, because we're at 38 states have sports betting, but 6 have iGaming.
It varies, and even those 6, it's basically New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, I think, are the 3 that really matter in terms of population size.
So you have these sweeps casinos just taking all that business that the regulated industry hypothetically would love to have.
I think there's 2 parts to that. You've got the sweeps business, which is growing and working within the sweeps regulation. There's still also a massive offshore casino industry targeting the US, and which is far bigger than the sweeps. Because it's just orders of magnitude big. It's and
figures for the sweeps though are extraordinary. So you're talking about mind-blowing money going offshore.
It really is, because the majority of the US population don't have access to a legal online casino, and the offshore has been doing this for a very, very long time. And the sweeps is still relatively new and relatively small in comparison. And I think it needs some scrutiny, but as long as they're operating within the rules, to me it seems like it's operating within the rules. And
that's it. If you've got a problem with it, you've got to change the rules. There's the AGA saying, these people are operating illegally. Pretty sure they're not. They might be exploiting little gaps that they've seen. But if they're illegal, they could just be shut down. That's not the same thing. And it's a very important distinction between illegal and unregulated. But to me, and I've been saying this for months, the AGA should be inviting them in. The AGA should have been the ones to instigate that new body that's been started up. the trade body for the sweeps people. They should have been behind that from the off. It should have been them driving that conversation, because the kind of money we're talking about is what the AGA is dreaming about. And, just pointing the finger and saying, you bad, you good, when, the start of this conversation and the psychiatrist lady, there is no black and white in this conversation at all. There's no black and white in any part of this conversation. The AGA is trying to be black and white. If the AGA wants things to change in the world of sweeps, they should be doing it with the arm around the shoulder and the big brother approach, not the 1984 big brother, the nice cuddly big brother, oh, you're older than me and related to me big brother, not George Orwell. And they should be saying, lads, how about a code of conduct? How about this? Here's how we can do things. Here's how we can help you do things. Here's how you can benefit your players. Take that approach. Not, you're all terrible, you're illegal, you're really bad. It's not.
But if it was
not the case.
Sorry, go on, Katherine.
Well, just you have to remember who the AGA is, right? They are FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM. Like, they are the industry. And so I think, there's a question about whether they would want to put their arms around sweepstakes if they're feeling threatened.
But if it was illegal, there'd be lawsuits. If it was illegal, and I know like Visa and MasterCard as a gatekeeper, and you see this in the adult industry as well, they would not be accepting these companies as customers. Because, as a percentage of revenue for Visa and MasterCard, it's a drop in the ocean, and why would we take the risk? Particularly given the nature of it will be deemed a high risk industry because of chargebacks and these kind of, in-app purchases and this kind of stuff. So it does feel like, I think the new body is a great idea. I think that's good. And I think the sweeps industry speaking with a voice and trying to get ahead of it is a great idea.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think the real answer is regulate online casino, and all of this goes away. Or not goes away, but it's like, okay, let's just regulate it and tax it and do that. And if not, then let's just make sure they're following the sweeps rules and they're not doing anything wrong there.
Let's
do you think the
properly.
sweeps
Set
want?
the rules in. Sorry. Oh, go on.
Well, I mean, I'm curious what you think about. Do the sweeps really want? Do they want online casino legalized? It seems like they're in a pretty.
Well, listen, if online casino becomes legalized, they've got such a colossal march in terms of reach already that suits them down to the ground. The big online sports books are the early movers, and they were the early movers because they had all the player data already. That's exactly what you have with these guys right now. They'll lap it up.
I would package up my sweeps business with a big bow and sell it to one of the big sports books and go, here you go, guys, crack on. Here's your problem solved.
Yeah.
And off you go into the sunset. I think it'd be the best thing to happen to the sweeps industry. I think the real challenge would be for the actual who'd really get hurt would be the offshore casino industry. I think that would be but again, it would be super important for responsible gambling and bringing those things into the, state jurisdiction and state regulators, and, there's somebody you can actually point at and sue or, revoke licenses for and stuff like that. And that kind of a level of accountability that's not there for the offshore guys. I think will be the big thing. And then when you look at, say, Pennsylvania's tax revenue numbers, it generates a lot of tax. I think Pennsylvania does more in tax revenue than New York does. So that's got to be if I was a state person and I've got a big hole in my budget, then it's an easy box to tick, in theory. So anyway. What else? The other.
Hang on.
Go on.
I have thought of something here that we didn't mention earlier that I want to ask Katherine about. I don't know if you've been reporting on this because I'm on holiday as we record this, so I'm not doing any homework. I think it's been passed, but I'm not 100% sure. That law in California saying that tribes can sue card rooms. Is that happening? Have you been reporting on that?
I have not been reporting on that.
Damn it.
Let's
cut this bit out. But it's a really interesting story because you basically got a law going through the incredible arcane machinations of the US legal system, saying that what the card room's been doing in California is they've been neatly and quite creatively so they can present card games where the house isn't a bank.
Right. I'm familiar with
it's essentially peer-to-peer play is fine, but they've been tweaking games so that they can offer other games than poker. So the bank moves with each player, etc. And all very, very clever, very cute stuff. The tribes have been saying, hang on a second, you can't do that. But what's emerged out of this and that is really interesting is the amount of tax revenue that the card rooms have been playing, and they reckon that this would actually be really debilitating to the communities that they're in with this sudden huge drop. And actually, I think that's actually really fascinating. And I know everybody talks about the potential taxes and all of that, and actually a lot of the taxes that have been raised since the legalization of sportsbook, or since the PASPA repeal, have been colossally disappointing for many states. But that's because of the way regulation was drawn up. But smaller gambling operations can actually have a profound impact to not massive places, because not every casino is in Philadelphia. Not every casino is in Chicago. A lot of these card rooms are often in quite small places, and they actually are part of doing some really good shit. They might not be consciously doing really good shit, but they're paying their taxes and they're paying their dues, and they're a part of the glue of the community. And I think that's pretty interesting. I'm certainly not dissing the tribes when I say this, because some of the tribal casinos, above and beyond, doesn't even come close to what they do in the community. There's some remarkable organizations out there doing really wonderful work. And not just for their own tribal members either, doing them for the wider community. But I think I feel like with that, if that law is passed, it just feels like there's a big ass can of worms going to be open there, and I don't think it's going to end well for anybody particularly. But anyway, as you're not reporting on it, this is all just conjecture.
Well, I'm familiar with the card rooms, and the way gambling or gambling-like experiences just keep cropping up in all these ways. I know card rooms have been around a long time, but the way they're creative, DFS, pick'em style, sweepstakes, this is a little far afield, but like those solitaire earn cash playing solitaire apps. Are you guys familiar with those?
Yeah, I've seen the ads.
They even have VIP hosts. It's like, it's just, it's everywhere you turn. It's really interesting to see.
I keep seeing those adverts and thinking, how on earth does that work? That old solitaire cash thing. I mean, I'd love to understand the mathematics.
Presumably it's just in-app purchases or something, right?
I think so. Yeah, and there's been some claims that some of these apps are using, this is a lawsuit, using, actually, you're playing against bots and not real players. So anyway, sorry to get us on the topic of solitaire, but it's fascinating to me, the whole world.
That's a pretty good qualification for being a reporter. Finton, what were you going to bring up before I jumped in with the unnecessary card room talk?
I was going to talk about we've had the opening weekend of the. It's probably too early to get numbers, but opening weekend of the NFL season, which kicks off what I like to call gambling season in America. And just obviously there's a lot going on with. Is this going to just be another FanDuel DraftKings blowout? Is ESPN Bet going to make a move? There's a lot riding on the new season for them. And yeah, I was just curious. Any thoughts on kind of early days of what you're seeing in the US?
Marketing madness, let's call it.
I think the marketing madness has cooled a bit. But there's a big push, definitely. I don't know what it's like compared to 2 or 3 years ago or during, when states were first launching. Since we just got through the first weekend of the regular season games, I mean, I think there's just questions in my mind. I think FanDuel and DraftKings is 67% market share was the last number I saw. So can they get even further? What's a Caesars or a BetMGM? Like, when we go back a few years, they were definitely bigger contenders. And then, of course, there's ESPN Bet, people talking a lot about this being the make or break season for them, and whether their product is able to, keep up with the user experience. All to be seen, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to check back in a couple of months. I think there was a lot of new stuff due coming for them soon, so it'll be interesting to see. Wonderful. I think we've taken tons of your time, Katherine. Thank you so much for coming back. John, yes, I hope you have a great time in your summer villa or wherever you're.
Call it what it is, Finton. It's a shepherd's hut.
He's in a shed.
It's a holiday shed.
Woo-hoo. So, Katherine, thank you so much for joining us again, and keep up with the great reporting. And we'll be just keep up with the great work, and really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was great. Great talking with you guys.